Workday also provides us with a 100% complete and total get out of jail free card, which is you have complete control over the data on your 1094 and 1095 forms. You do have the ability to override every single field on the 1094 and 1095 forms.
Hello, friends. I'm Jeff Miller from ERPA, and you're listening to The Possibility Perspective, the show where we talk to strategic-minded Workday customers who partner with ERPA for a better Workday experience.
Hello, friends. Good afternoon. My name is Colleen O'Brien-McFall from ERPA. Thank you all so much for joining. ERPA supports customers throughout their entire life cycle on Workday with implementation services, application support, private to public cloud tenant migration, and so much more. Customers are always telling us they love our integration warranties, our flexible approach that meets their changing needs, and especially our named resources. With ERPA, you always know who you're working with on every project, rather than submitting a ticket that goes to the next available stranger who is unfamiliar with your tenant setup and configuration. But today is all about Affordable Care Act. As you browse our table of contents, our goal today is to show you helpful information that will be provided by Workday, our community related to ACA, as well as the level of work you can expect. We'll also have some data review tips and tricks to share, and we'll end the federal and state filing. What's in store for you today is a rich discussion by two of our seasoned experts, ERPA's own Heather Williams and Beth Granozio. All right, I'll leave it to you two to take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Heather Williams, and I am an HCM architect here at ERPA. I have been with ERPA about a year and a half, but I have been in the Workday ecosystem about 12 and a half years, primarily doing benefits. But in addition to being certified in benefits, I'm also certified in HCM, core compensation, advanced compensation, and project management. And before I worked in the Workday ecosystem, I worked with PeopleSoft and other systems in the ERP arena. So I've got a lot of experience with ERP and benefits. So Beth?
Thanks, Heather. My name is Beth Granozio. I've been with ERPA about 2.5 years now. Certified in the Workday as a Workday implementer for 11 and in the ecosystem working with Workday for 13. So I started on the client side. As benefits is my major area of focus, I'm also a generalized HCM architect at ERPA, certified in HCM talent performance, people experience, as well as benefits. So really excited to talk to you guys about ACA today and the things that we've learned over the years and impart some of that knowledge to you to get you ready and thinking about the year to come.
Okay. So regardless of your experience level, there is a lot of good information on community around ACA. So we're going to take a look at what's available to you. But we're going to take a look at what is available to you on community as far as available resources. So our first link that we have out here is the FAQs for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. This is just a lot of good information about how Workday is determining who is going to get a form, who is a full-time employee, how is Workday determining all the information that it uses to fill out and complete your 1094 and 1095C forms. Another good resource here is our ACA reporting features FAQs. This one is specific to the 1094, 1095C forms. It gives you some good information about the mandate for ACA, what are the Affordable Care Act features. So it does give you a little bit of information about some of the other features that are in Workday in addition to the 1094 and 1095C reporting. So you can click each one of these, and you can see a lot of these also have links in them that will lead you to other helpful information. This one is really good if you are planning on doing your ACA reporting yourself. This is a step-by-step guide of everything that you need to do to set up your ACA forms for your 1094 and 1095C reporting. And again, you can see as you scroll down through this one, you have additional links that you can click and you could open into a new tab. And each one of these is going to give you additional detailed information of things that you need to do to complete your configuration. Here is the 1095-C form code reference. This is a very handy tool to help you determine how Workday is creating each one of the codes that it puts in each one of the lines on the ACA forms. It does link you to the IRS link that tells, this is what Workday is using directly from the IRS to determine what those codes are using. So it's using the IRS guidelines to determine that. But this just gives you information about what each one of the codes means for each one of the lines, so you can determine on your own or whether with your broker or your legal counsel if the codes that Workday is determining are the codes that are right for you. And then finally, there is the Affordable Care Act checklist, which is, again, a great guide that has a lot of information in it about how to do everything step by step and the guide that you need to prepare yourself for the ACA configuration for each year. And next, we're going to move on to how is Workday going to decide who gets a 1095-C form. So here are the three main categories of who is going to get a form, a 1095-C form in Workday. First is going to be your full-time workers. These are going to be your workers that have scheduled weekly hours of 30 or more, since that is the IRS standard. Another group of workers who's going to get a form is your part-time workers who qualify as ACA eligible during the calendar year. So if you are using Workday's measurement feature to determine somebody who should be ACA eligible and offered medical coverage, if they are ACA eligible, they are going to receive that form. And finally, another group of workers that will receive a form is your part-time workers who are offered medical coverage. So if you go above and beyond the IRS standard of 30 hours and say you offer coverage to workers who work 20 hours or more, those workers will also receive a 1095-C form because you are offering them medical coverage. So now Beth is going to talk to you about your ACA company configuration and what settings are right for you. So Beth, take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Heather. So if this is your first year using Workday to file your 1094, 1095 reporting requirements, you may have some questions around things like what type of certification of eligibility did we file under previously if you don't have that information readily available to you, or did we use a safe harbor in the process of our filing? Here on the prior year's filing form, it is going to show you on that 1094 form under field 22 if the qualifying offer method was used for certification of eligibility, or if you use the 98% offer method for that certification of eligibility for the filing year, or if you did not actually file leveraging a certification of eligibility. That's easily identified if you can find a copy of a prior year submitted 1094-C form. Also, your brokers typically can recommend the settings on here for your current filing year. So if you filed out of Workday in prior years, you can view the ACA company configuration from a prior year to check the settings for your certification of eligibility, or you could check your prior year filing forms if in fact you did it from another system. Another item that there's typically a lot of question around is if you filed leveraging a safe harbor. So if we take a look on the next slide, there's some hints around how to investigate and see what safe harbors you may have filed under in prior plan years. So when a safe harbor is used for a population in filing, those values are shown when an individual chooses to waive coverage when it's offered to them. Those values appear in line 16 on the 1095-C form. If a person waives coverage and there's no value in line 16, that means no safe harbor has been applied for the reporting requirements for that year. If there is a code when the employee waived the coverage, it's going to be one of the 4 codes that we're showing on this slide above, 2E, 2F, 2G, or 2H. And each one of them indicates a distinctive safe harbor filing. Now, with Workday, it does allow you to slice and dice your population so that various safe harbors apply to different portions of your population. Say you use a W-2 safe harbor for your salaried employees, but for your hourly employees, you want to apply a rate of pay safe harbor. You would be able to identify that on the individual forms with the varying codes from a prior filing year. All right. Once we decide on that filing, it's quite easy to move forward and check out the information you have. Workday provides a 1095-C form recipient data report. That report, once you generate your data for the tax year that you are reporting on, will provide you in an Excel format every individual who is getting a form and the values in each and every individual block on their form in a manner in which you can filter those forms and check out that data. Workday also provides us with a 100% complete and total get out of jail free card, which is you have complete control over the data on your 1094 and 1095 forms. Workday provides the information based on the system processing that it has done during the tax year. If you disagree with any of that information or have additional backup where manual workarounds were used, you do have the ability to override every single field on the 1094 and 1095 forms. That View 1095-C form recipient data report aligns exactly with the EIB format to update the existing forms. What those are is essentially, you have all of the data populated, and anything you want to change, you would alter on that EIB template and upload it into the system. It would alter the data on that individual's 1095 form without touching your production data in Workday. On the deck, we do have embedded links to the EIB samples for updating when you have a single company update on your filing. And also an example, if there are multiple companies involved that you're updating with the same EIB, both of those provide you links into Community where you can see those samples at those places within Community so that you have those additional details. Again, Community is your best friend with the guidance on this. The next thing that people usually start to wonder about when it's ACA time is, how much work is this actually going to be?
Well, we have used our experience to classify the level of work into high, medium, and low effort. So let me show you some examples here. Okay, so first, our high effort. Our higher level of effort is really going to be when the data that you need to populate your forms, to populate them correctly, is not found in Workday. There are some various reasons for this. Could be that maybe your medical history was not loaded, or you have significant gaps. Maybe you went live with Workday last year and you weren't able to get that history information into Workday. This can be a high level of effort, but again, like Beth said about the EIB, you have that ability to download that information and then upload that information into Workday using the EIB. So if you don't have the history there to support the forms, you can put that information back into Workday using that EIB. Another reason why it might be a high level of effort is your benefits are handled by a third party, but they're not going to do the filing for you. And so you need to get that information into Workday so that you can do your filing out of Workday. Again, you can load that information back up using the EIB, but that is significant effort to review that information and get it back into Workday. Another reason why it might be a high level is that you have an acquisition during the year, and you're going to be responsible for doing the forms for that acquired population, but you don't have that information in Workday. So you obtain that information from their prior system, and then you load that into Workday. Next, for our medium level of effort. So our medium level of effort, if you have a lot of FEINs or ALE groups for your filing, because each entity has to be filed separately, that's going to be a little bit more effort than some other projects. So if you have, probably 4 or 5 or more FEINs or ALEs, that's going to be more effort than it will be for a smaller company. If you have benefit processing issues leading to some significant data updates, for some reason, not all of your information is there, that you had some system limitations of why the history information might not be in Workday for this current year, that's going to be a little bit more effort than some others. And finally, if you have a large COBRA or external population that you need to load into Workday, such as if you have a lot of retirees, for instance, or other external participants that you need to load their information into Workday, that's going to be some effort. And finally, for our lower level of effort, If you've used Workday in the past to do your filing, it's very easy to copy the information from the previous year and just put it in for the new tax year. If you've got your clean historical benefits data, so you've been live on Workday for a while, so your population is populating their changes and their hires and job changes and qualifying life events into Workday. And then also if you have 3 or fewer separate FEIN or ALE groups, again, your level of effort is going to be lower. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Beth, who is going to give you some more tips on your configuration and how to review your data.
All right. So there are a few gotchas in configuration that I'd like to call out to you, as well as some tips for getting through the form validation itself. We'll start with the configuration side. The eligibility rules that evaluate the data in the forms that are produced. The issue that we want to call out there is that those fields only evaluate your data as of the current date. So if you are trying to tune in or tune out a population from your 1094, 1095 processing, say you have student workers that you don't file 1095 forms on, or individuals that may go from a regular employee to a temp and you don't file your 1095s on your temporary population. If you tune out that population using an eligibility rule, it's going to tune those forms out or not produce forms for everyone who is that status as of the day that you generate the forms. It does not go back and historically look at, was this person eligible for a form in any month of the tax filing year, to know to tune them in or tune them out. With this in mind, what we have done historically is create calculated fields to evaluate the employee data as of each month of the tax year to accurately define either tuning rules or safe harbor rules. Another thing to keep in mind here is once an employee is terminated, a lot of fields no longer populate in reporting. So you lose the ability to populate easily full-time or part-time, employee type, organizations that employees were members of, the company that they were in. Therefore, we strongly recommend the use of some calculated fields in that to ensure that you're evaluating the worker for those rules for the entire tax year. And as you can see here, those are those values: hire date, original hire date, termination date, rehire, time type, employee type. So what we recommend is the calculated fields in order to return that information. If we look at this, we have some examples within our deck where we're showing you how those calculated fields are built in general. We use things like build date, lookup value as of date, and true false calculated fields in order to return the value as of each month or the beginning of each month of the tax year for an accurate definition of those eligibility rules. Our next slide is an example of a build date slide. Here, essentially what we're doing is we're building a date for each day of the month and for the last day of the year to look at the values as of those dates. So you would have a build date to look at the value the first day of, or hard code, December 1st of last calendar year, February 1st of last calendar year, and you would leverage those to pull back the information as of each one of those dates. If we take a look at an example of a lookup value as of date, what we're then doing is looking up the value of the field as of each of those dates that we had built. So first of each month of the prior year for the tax reporting that we're doing. We would look up the value as of January 1st of last year, February 1st of last year, March 1st of last year, and ongoing to return what their employee type as of each month. And if they were regular any month of the year and you want to treat them that way for the entire year, you can see that within any of the month is true, then the rule would apply. The last item on here is that kind of true false, where we would be saying if this value were true as of each of the months of the year, then return the eligibility for the entire year. So if the safe harbor should apply to people who were salaried any day of the year, then if the salaried comes back for 1 month in the year, you would be applying that safe harbor eligibility rule. So now that we have our information looked at and reviewed, it's now time to do our federal filings. So on our federal filings for this year, Heather's going to review some of the dates with you and get you going there. Heather?
Okay, thank you, Beth. So Workday has a delivered very robust process for the ACA federal filing. So we're going to take a look at that. So first off, we're going to show you some important dates. If you are filing by paper, which you're probably not going to be doing because Workday does have the electronic filing solution available to you. But if you are providing the IRS with paper forms, and this is just for the IRS, not for the employee forms, but if you're doing the IRS forms by paper, your deadline is February 28th. We don't display that date on here because we assume that you are here because you want to know about the electronic filing. But if you are sending paper forms out, your form mailing deadline is March 2nd. If March 2nd should ever happen to fall on a weekend, it was going to be the first business day after March 2nd, but March 2nd is Monday this year, so March 2nd will be your deadline. Just keep in mind that actually in 2024, Congress passed House Bill 3797. We've got a link to that here in our deck as well so that you can take a look at that. But this is the Paperwork Burden Reduction Act, which means that you do not have to send paper forms to employees or to your participants unless they request one. It's a good idea to send your paper forms to your terminated employees, especially if they are not going to have access to Workday to download forms. But a lot of companies do give their terminated employees access to Workday to download forms after they have terminated. So if you do that, you don't need to send paper forms, even to your terminated workers. But if those terminated workers don't have access to Workday, Workday does give you a great option for how you can send those forms to your terminated workers. You're able to separate those terminated workers out into a separate file, and you can just download and print those specific forms for your terminated workers and send those out just to them. And then finally, for our electronic filing deadline with the IRS, that is March 31st, 2026. So you'll need to make sure that you have sent your electronic filing before that date. As far as that integration goes, so the actual electronic connector to Workday, Workday does offer an IRS connector. It is due out this weekend into your production tenants. It was delivered to preview on January 2nd, but with your regular scheduled updates this weekend, it should go into your production and sandbox tenants, so you'll have it available there for testing. And then once it's there, you can go ahead and set up that connector in 3 simple steps. You don't have to have an integration expert because it's pretty simple to set up. You can always bring in somebody who is experienced in integrations if you'd like, but you can set it up yourself. First, you need to create your integration system. You'll just want to give it a name, something that's very clear as far as what it is doing. You can name it something like ACA IRS Connector for your tax year 2025. And that way you can kind of keep track of each integration system year after year so that you're showing each one. And then once Workday has released the updated template, which will be again over this weekend, you'll select the ACA Information Returns 2025 template for the 2025 tax year. This option is not going to appear until that release, which should be this weekend. You don't need to have an ISU for this integration. If you set up an ISU, that's totally fine, but you don't necessarily need one. And then once you have created the integration, you are going to see an error, but don't be worried or alarmed about this error. You just have one more step to complete your process. And the error does provide really great direction on what you need to do. It does tell you that before you start, you'll want to review the electronic reporting notice. And from the related actions menu in your integration system, you'll select integration and then click accept ACA electronic reporting notice. And also one thing to keep in mind is if you are using a third party for your process, they may have earlier deadlines than the IRS deadline. So you may need to get them the information to those third party providers earlier so that they can process your information. And then running the integration connector. The integration has to be run separately for each of your FEINs or ALE groups for which you're doing your filing. The integration provides 3 different run modes. So the first mode is to validate without sending. This is sort of limited validation, but it does give you some information for the fit and format of certain fields. It's not going to validate codes on the form. It's not going to validate name and SSN matching with the IRS, but it is going to let you know if you have fields that are over the IRS limit of 35 characters. It'll let you know if you've got some missing information. So you'll always want to run it there first, just so that you have that information and can correct anything as much as possible before you send it. Once you have cleared up any of those errors and you've cleaned up all of your data, you're ready to send the data. So that is the second mode. And this is actually going to transmit that data to the IRS. Once you've sent your data, then you can come back in a few days later and check your status. So this is going to go out and sweep the IRS server and import the information that the IRS has audited and send it back to you in Workday. And as far as checking that status in Workday, so once you run this in that check status mode, the ACA transmission report is going to allow you to drill down and see the information on your forms in Workday. So once you run that status, you get in the ACA transmission report, you can click the View Integration Event button, and that's going to lead you to some more information in Workday. So in this example that we have here, this is before it's been sent. So here you have your records not sent count. Once you do that send data, it's going to move everything into the processing counts. And then once you are checking your data, you're going to start seeing information come back in your various statuses here for your accepted with no errors count. Hopefully most of your information comes back with your accepted with no errors. The IRS says these are good, no further action is needed. Then you have your accepted with errors count and rejected count. Each one of these, once you have brought your data back in and you've run this into your check status mode, each one of these is going to be drillable. So if you have things that come back with accepted with errors count, you'll be able to click on this number, see who is accepted with errors, see who is rejected, and then you can start digging into the different errors that you have and see about correcting your data. When you initially send your data, it's probably good to wait probably at least 3 to 5 business days before you come back in and check your status. It takes a few days for that to get processed, and depending on when you send your data, might be a slightly busier time for the IRS. So don't be worried if it doesn't come back right away. Give it a few days and check your status. And once you have gotten your accepted with errors and your rejected count, that is when you can go back in and review that data and make your corrections. You can use that same EIB that you can use to load your external data or override any of your information, to then use that EIB to load corrected data back into Workday. So you'll load your corrected data back into Workday, and then you'll resubmit it and send it to the IRS again, and hopefully that will take care of any of those errors. So once they have been corrected, it is going to have that correct, for any of your accepted with errors count, it will show those corrected errors. If they are rejected, it's not going to show them in correction status necessarily, but it is going to go ahead and process that information. And then kind of our most important note here, once you have transmitted your forms, whether that's the original or the correction, please make sure that you come back in and check your status and you run everything in that check status mode so you can get everything moved through correctly. And also just keep in mind that as far as those errors are concerned, just do your due diligence in trying to correct as much as possible. If there's something that you just can't track down, as long as you've done your due diligence and you've tried to track it down and you've tried to get that information, you've done your due diligence and you've done your job. Okay, so first we're going to talk a little bit about some of the errors that we have. So some common errors that we do see come back from the IRS is field length. But remember, when you run it in that validation mode and you'll get some of those field length errors out of the way, sometimes they still come back, but field length errors are fairly common. Missing field data is another common error that comes back. Maybe we don't have a SSN or some information for a dependent, or maybe there's some other missing information on a dependent, like an address or something else. Another very common error is the SSN or name mismatch, that a social security number or a name that is in Workday for an employee or a dependent doesn't match what the IRS has on file. Another common error that we see is our 1094 count errors. You'll want to ensure that the counts on your 1094 form match the counts for the 1095C forms that you submitted. There is a process that you can go through to make sure that those counts match. And then finally, code agreement errors, where maybe an example for this is where the code that's in line 14 requires the lowest cost to be populated in line 15, and it's not. So these are some of the things that we see come back.
And Heather, with that, if you're self-insured, it could be information or the SSN mismatch on one of your dependents, your covered individuals. We have been successful at times in the past, blowing away the social security number for the dependent on the form, populating their date of birth instead and resubmitting in order to clear out some of those errors. So that's one of the opportunities when we're seeing some of those, and it's on the dependents under covered individual.
Okay, well, now Beth is going to talk to us a little bit about ACA state filing.
All right. So various individual states have individual filing mandate as well, from the West Coast to the East Coast. Let's take a look at it and review your population for state filing requirements. We've got our state filing deadlines listed here the way they are for the 2025 filing tax year. California's deadlines are the distribution to employees is by February 2nd, and their state reporting filing electronically deadline is March 31st, lining up with the federal electronic filing deadline. Now, California has said also that there is no penalty if you extend through May 31st of 2026. Massachusetts does their herd filing. New Jersey follows the federal deadlines of the March 2nd, March 31st mailing deadlines, as does Rhode Island. Washington, D.C. follows the mailing deadline for the feds, but they give a month extension on the electronic filing within Washington, D.C. On that state filing, what we recommend is it's customary that if an individual lived in any of these states during at least 1 month of the tax year, that you would be responsible for filing with that state for the tax year. So for that, the state that shows up on the form is their current mailing address state, not where they lived during the prior year. Those build date, lookup value as of date, and true false statements to see if they lived in one of the individual mandatory filing states for any month of the year during the tax year can be leveraged here to see who you really need to file individual state filing for. For individual state filing, Workday does not actually deliver a solution for that. You can leverage Workday, particularly with custom reporting, in order to get the filing information together. What Workday does offer is an integrated solution with some of Workday's software partner firms. Some of those firms are Trusaic, Experian, which some of you may know as the artist formerly known as CIC Plus, along with ADP. What that allows for is a pass-through for those partner firms to pull out the ACA form data. It only lets them into the form data area of Workday from a security perspective. They pull down your data that you've created within Workday and use that, reformat it, and leverage it in order to prepare for your state filings for each of your states. So that's more of the automated solution. Anything else would require custom reporting on that. And with that, I believe we're going to move into a short Q&A session. We did have one question come in, which was, if HRA isn't offered, does Workday automatically populate the age on the form? Workday does. And in fact, based on errors received in the past, the IRS is looking for that field to be populated on their connectors, regardless of whether an HRA plan is elected. So we've had a lot of luck with that. But let me now go ahead and turn it over to the people who have the control over our Q&A and can take us out.
Thank you so much, Heather, for looking after that, as well as Beth. Really appreciate all of that. And if we peek over to the next slide, you'll see on this slide that ERPA is a Workday partner, but we're also an AWS partner. This slide here says that if your organization wishes, you can use AWS Marketplace to streamline your experience transacting your services with ERPA. It's just an option, and it's not your only option with the ERPA. Use it if it only makes sense and if it's only more convenient for you. Thank you again, Heather and Beth. And this next slide shows how to get in touch with us. Reach out to us if you want to chat or follow up with any questions whatsoever. Thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to The Possibility Perspective. If you'd like to talk to ERPA about what's next in your Workday journey, be sure to visit erpa.com.